One of my favourite books is Jack Higgins' 1975 thriller The Eagle Has Landed, which is largely set in Norfolk, England, where I currently live, along the county's lonely and sparsely populated northern coast. In the novel, the story begins with Higgins, while researching a local history project, stumbling upon the hidden mass grave of 13 German Luftwaffe paratroopers in a quiet churchyard in the fictional village of Studley Constable. The Fallschirmjäger having been killed in action after attempting to kidnap British Prime Minister Winston Churchill in 1943 while he was spending a quiet weekend at a lonely country house. Well, of course, Studley Constable may be fictional, but hidden away in a quiet churchyard at the edge of the royal estate at Sandringham on Norfolk's northern coast is indeed a group of dead German Luftwaffe personnel, 11 in all, who were all killed during the war and buried together in one place. When I arrived at the tiny village of Great Bircham, 8 miles or so from Sandringham House, the weather perfectly mirrored the scene in Higgins' book when he arrives at Studley Constable Church. It was overcast and raining and cold and deadly quiet. Apart from an occasional car passing through the village, no one was about. The Church of St. Mary the Virgin is fairly substantial, surrounded by a large graveyard with tombs and memorials dating back some centuries and tall trees full of cawing crows. Pulling up the collar of my coat against the rain, I walked up to the entrance to the church, and I was soon inside. It was large, but rather sullen and sombre, with memorials to royal benefactors and local worthies, the village partly owned by the royal family to this day, forming part of the huge 21,000-acre Sandringham estate, one of King Charles III's private homes. Intriguingly, the church contained no overt clues to the German burials outside. Leaving the church, I walked to a corner of the graveyard that is separated by a neat hedge and gate, and dominated by a fine stone memorial cross indicative of British war cemeteries all over the world. And there they were, rows of German graves facing Allied graves. The Allied casualties, Airmen from the local airfield during the war, including several Australians, New Zealanders, Canadians and South Africans. But facing them in eternity 10 Germans in 2 neat rows, with an 11th tagged on to the first row on the Allied side. The Germans' headstones the same standard design as the British Commonwealth ones, but each marked at the top with a carved iron cross. So why are 11 German soldiers still lying in a British country churchyard 78 years after the war ended? It is a bit unusual. In 1959, the British government decided to gather up all the German wartime graves in Britain, and with the cooperation of the West German government, to rebury them all in one place, the German cemetery at Cannock Chase in Staffordshire. Cannock Chase currently holds over 5,000 German military graves, and was completed by 1967. But many Germans were overlooked and left in churchyards and public cemeteries the length of Britain, where they were buried during the war. And today, around 1,000 German servicemen remain buried in this way. The Great Bircham Village Cemetery in North Norfolk, with 11 graves, is an interesting one, and one of the largest outside Cannock Chase, and all the burials are Luftwaffe aircrew. They include one of the very earliest German casualties in Britain, the grave of Oberfeldwebel Emil Rödel, the observer on a Heinkel HE-115 seaplane that crashed on the beach at Sheringham in Norfolk on the 5th of December 1939. The crew had been laying mines offshore when the aircraft clipped the radar pylon at West Beckham, causing it to crash. All 3 crew were killed. Oberfeldwebel Rödel was found dead at the scene and was buried by the RAF with full military honours at Great Bircham. The pilot washed ashore later and was buried at Sheringham. On the 21st of August 1940, a Dornier DO-17Z was shot down over Burnham Market and crashed into the sea off Brancaster in Norfolk. The 4 crew members all perished and all eventually washed ashore. Unteroffizier Kaschner's body coming ashore at Brancaster and was subsequently buried at Great Bircham. That same day, another Dornier 17 was shot down into the sea off Skegness in Lincolnshire. On the 9th of September 1940, the badly decomposed body of Unteroffizier Bruno Skibitsky was washed up at Brancaster and was likewise buried at Great Bircham. Both of these Dornier 17s were of course destroyed during the famous Battle of Britain. On the 9th of March 1941, 23-year-old Karl Lesmöhlmann was killed when the Junkers 88A5, of which he was one of 4 crewmen, was shot down by a No. 266 Squadron Spitfire off the coast at Skegness. Lesmöhlmann's body eventually washed ashore in Norfolk on the 27th of April 1941 and was buried at Great Bircham. The other crewmen were never found. Guy Gibson would achieve everlasting fame for leading the 1943 Dambusters raid, but earlier in the war he briefly served as a night fighter pilot and made a kill on the night of the 14th of March 1941 when flying a Bristol Beaufighter. Gibson shot down a Heinkel HE-111H3 off Skegness Pier. The Heinkel crashed into the sea, and one of the crew's bodies, Gefreiter Helmut Seidel, washed ashore in Norfolk 3 months later and was buried at Great Bircham. Interestingly, one of the propellers from Seidel's Heinkel was netted by a local fishing boat in September 2007 and brought ashore. It was sold at auction in December 2020 for £9,000. Seidel's headstone shows the date 2nd of June 1941, the date his body was washed ashore. Unteroffizier Heinz Biestefeld was the radio operator on a Junkers 88 that crashed under unknown circumstances on the 26th of May 1941, going into the Sea of Norfolk. Biestefeld's body was the only member of the crew to be washed ashore. Part of a raid on Castle Bromwich near Birmingham on the 5th of June 1941, a Heinkel HE-111H5 of Kampfgeschwader 4 was attacked over the Wash by a British night fighter. The aircraft went down, Oberleutnant Günther Truckenbrot bailing out into the sea, while the rest of the crew stayed with the plane, the pilot making a forced landing, during which they all perished. Oberleutnant Truckenbrot's body was recovered on the 3rd of July 1941, while observer Unteroffizier Horst Walter and wireless operator Paul Weber were also recovered dead from the sea and all buried at Great Bircham, the bodies of the pilot and other crew member never found. Jakob Reed, a 25-year-old wireless operator on a Junkers 88 night fighter, died following his aircraft being attacked by an RAF night fighter. He managed to bail out on the 14th of June 1941, but was killed when his parachute failed to open. His body washed up in Norfolk on the 7th of July 1941, hence his date of death on his headstone recorded at Great Bircham. One of the other 2 crewmen was also later found and is buried at Sutton Bridge in Lincolnshire. The last Luftwaffe burial at Great Bircham was from a Heinkel HE-111H5 blasted out of the sky by RAF night fighter ace John Cat's Eyes Cunningham on the 22nd of August 1941 off Wells next the Sea, Norfolk. The body of crewman Rudolf Wart washed ashore at Burnham Overy on the 31st of August 1941. The other 3 crewmen were never recovered. The Heinkel was Cat's Eyes Cunningham's 14th aerial victory of the war. It is a little strange to see the German headstones facing those of the Allied dead, and in death they have all been accorded a dignified burial, and everyone's graves are beautifully maintained by locals. It is a place of peace and contemplation, and a reminder of how so many young men's lives on both sides were cut tragically short by the horrors of war. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.